Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you're joining us as we kick off our TCK series for Season 3 of our podcast. Our guest today is third culture kid expert Tanya Crossman, who has worked over 20 years with and researching issues related to TCKs to support international organizations, schools, churches, and families. Tanya is from Australia and is the Director of Research at TCK Training. She tells us about her time as a TCK in the US and her transition back to Australia. And we also spend some time discussing her research and writings, especially her book, Misunderstood: The Impact of Growing Up Overseas in the 21st Century. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part 1 of Tanya's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
Hello, Tanya Crossman. Welcome to the Round Trip Stories podcast. We're so happy that you're joining us today.
It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Tanya Crossman is a leading expert in the field of modern third culture kids and issues facing cross-cultural families, with 18 years experience in the field, including 10 years research experience. She is the author of the book Misunderstood: The Impact of Growing Up Overseas in the 21st Century, that came out in 2016. And it's a book which opens a window on the experience of an international childhood in the internet age. Tanya is the Director of Research and International Education at TCK Training, a leading global provider of preventative care for TCKs, where she was lead author on 3 white papers on TCKs and adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Tanya and I go back to Beijing. I was there 2009 to 2013, and a couple of those years we were on staff together at our international church. I worked with the little kids, and you worked with the high schoolers and middle schoolers, right?
Yeah, all of the teenagers. Once they start talking back to you, send them to me.
With pleasure.
Goodness. So, Tanya, we are really looking forward to having you share with us. So, as we get started, can you give us a little bit of your backstory? Just a quick summary about you and your family and where you grew up and how you ended up where you are now.
So my dad worked for a tech company called IBM, which within IBM, the acronym is I've been moved, because a lot of IBM families got moved around the country or around the globe.
See.
So we moved within Australia and to the US twice. So once when I was very small. So I lived in North Carolina for a few months as a toddler. And then when I was 13, our family, now with 2 younger sisters, moved and lived in Connecticut for 2 years and went to a local middle and high school over there, which was quite the experience. And then moved back, repatriated to Australia when I was 15, back into an Australian school. Being with a corporate family, we didn't get any informational training. I didn't know I was a third culture kid. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know the word repatriation. I didn't know anything. So it wasn't until later, when I was 21, I moved to China to study for a year and stayed for 10 and a half years, as you do.
Oh, that's a long time.
And while I was there, I started working with third culture kids and learned that was a word. But it still took 2 years for me to realize that was me, that I was a third culture kid too. And it was looking at research and literature on repatriation, on going back to your passport country, and went, oh, that's what I went through. Yes.
So you're saying that when you were looking up stuff about moving back home, that's when you realized a part of your identity as a third culture kid. How interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Because that had been a really difficult experience for me. And I thought there was just something wrong with me that I couldn't cope. And then I read the literature on TCKs and repatriation, and I see everything I went through written down on a list in black and white and go, so what happened to me is normal.
I love that feeling that you're normal.
That's the feeling that I want to give everybody with my books, with my writing.
Yes.
So So after 10 and a half years, I was getting ready to move back to Australia to study, to do my master's. I stayed in Cambodia for 6 months on the way through. I'd been going in and out of Cambodia for years, doing work with TCKs there. And then I was in Australia and Sydney studying for 3 years, during which time I started dating my now husband, and I moved back to China to marry him. He is a TCK, so he's an American citizen, but he lived in China most of his life. So I moved back there where he was until COVID. And then, long story short, I got locked out of the country because the border closed and all the visas were cancelled. So I've been living with my parents for the last 3.5 years. Not ideal in your 40s, but that's how it is. And working on my immigration papers to join my husband where he is now in the US. So that is my brief migration, global mobility story.
Okay, so we're particularly interested in what your repatriation experience was like coming back as a teenager. So you coming back from the US to Australia. So tell us about that. How'd that go?
So when we moved to the US, we went with a lot of financial compensation, as you do when you move corporately. So we had, the house was taken care of, the salaries taken care of, the move was taken care of. But there was no sort of social emotional support. We didn't know anything about cultural things. And there's this assumption when you are an English speaker going into another English speaking country that it'll be easy, right?
Right.
But the reality is that Australia and the US have very different cultures, not just different dialects of English, but different cultures in very unseen ways. And because I'm an English speaker coming in, there's an assumption that we are the same culture. So when I made cultural mistakes, the assumption is that I'm doing this on purpose. So I made a lot of mistakes. The most common one that Australians and that Americans clash with is that the most common Australian way to show affection is to tease people. That does not go down so well with your middle and high school friends.
Okay, I can see that.
The closer you get to someone, the more you make fun of them. So you're as your acquaintances, you don't make fun of each other, but as you get closer, so these people that you're now friends with, as you get closer to them and you're making more fun of them, it's very confusing for them. We're also much more informal with authority figures. So I'm not going to treat teachers with all the respect that they are expecting from children. So that can get me in a bit of trouble too. Certain teachers got along with really, really well. Other teachers did not know how to handle me. And so it could be a little tricky. I learned how I was required to act, but it made me feel like I was acting. I was putting on a show, which was stressful.
Right. It didn't come naturally to you. Now, remind us again, what grade were you in, or how old were you when you moved to the US?
So the Australian school year runs January to December. So I finished grade 8 in Australia, and I did the first term, the first quarter of grade 9, then moved over the Easter break, then did the last 4 to 6 weeks of grade 8 in the US, had the summer break, and then started grade 9. I did grade 9 and half of grade 10, and then started grade 11 in Australia. So it was a mess. But yeah, so it was stressful being there. I was in a school with 2,400 students and 600 teachers, and I was the only Australian. My accent shifted, but I still sounded Australian. Everyone knew me. When there was gossip about me in the school, anyone who heard me knew who I was. Oh, you're the Australian. I was very excited to go back to Australia and be normal and relax. And then I get to Australia and my accent shifted, so to the Australians I sound American. I was immediately nicknamed Miss America.
Oh, gosh.
So it was the opposite of what I was hoping for. I was standing out instead of fitting in. My clothes were different because American high schoolers dress differently to Australian high schoolers. It didn't take me long to fit in, but that first couple of weeks when you're meeting new people at a new school, I stood out. And it was a huge disappointment because I had been pinning all this hope on I'm going to go back and be normal. I can get through these last few months of standing out and stress because I'm going to go back and be normal. And I wasn't. And it was a huge letdown.
So how did you deal with that as a teenager?
It's really lucky in that I had a youth group to go into. So the youth pastor at our church, they knew that we were coming back and had told the youth group and the kids. So we, like, the day we got back, I had a call from the youth group saying, hey, we have got this activity on the weekend. Do you want to come? And I was immediately brought into this friend group that knew that I'd been in America. They were all new to the church since I'd left, but they knew about me and knew I'd been gone, and I didn't have to tell those parts of my story. And that made a massive difference for me because I could just step in. Yes, I still stood out. Yes, I was still called Miss America. Yes, like, it was still not easy, but I had an immediate place to go. And that helped a lot, just having some routine and some activities planned where I didn't have to make the friends that was kind of set up for me. That really helped a lot. But mostly it was just a slow process of adjusting and adapting. So within a year, everything was fine. Everything was normal. It was really just those first couple of months, that shock of things not being what I'd expected.
So Tanya, was your transition back different or similar to your sisters who were younger than you?
Great question. We all had very different experiences. So my next sister down, she was 11, like about to turn 12 when we left, and 13 when we got back. So I really struggled and didn't like my school and my life in the US. My next sister down loved it, like would have stayed there forever, was really close with her friends. And so she was really sad about leaving. Like, she was devastated to leave. But she did the same thing she did when she arrived in the States. She like cried herself to sleep every night for a month and then threw herself into life. And she did something very similar coming back to Australia, where she was incredibly sad leaving the States, but very quickly threw herself into life and making all of the friends. And again, made some really close friends and joined all the activities. So that's just who she is as a person. But she kept a lot of those friends in the States, whereas I basically hardly stayed in touch with anybody. My last sister, she was much younger, so she was eight when we arrived and 10 when we came back, I think. And so for her, she as a person is just a very go with the flow kind of person. So I think that's less about her age and more about just who she is as an individual.
Thanks for explaining that about the different experiences of you and your sisters, because same family, right? But different kinds of kids, different ages, different ways to deal with going to another country and then coming back and repatriating.
Yeah. And that's really common with so many of the families I work with. You won't have the same experience with both kids because no two kids are the same. They are unique individuals and they're going to respond to the same situation differently because we all do. Some of us are pre-grievers, some of us are post-grievers, some of us are very internalized, some of us are very externalized. Like some kids, you are going to hear when they are upset. Other kids, they're going to go to their room and be very quiet while they work through what they're feeling. And so you're just not going to see the same reaction from every kid. And they're going to make different friends. Some of them are going to make really close friends and some of them aren't. And that's going to change the way that they experience their international life.
So can you define third culture kids and tell us the story about why they are so near and dear to your heart?
So there are a few definitions floating out there. The definition I use, a traditional third culture kid, is someone who lives outside their passport country for a significant amount of time. So usually we look at it's at least 1 year before the age of 18. It's not just a study abroad. Generally it's with their family and with the intention of returning. So that's what makes it different to immigration. We're not going there intending to stay. We're going there expecting to leave. We're not going there to get legal status. So a TCK does not have legal status in the country where they're living and will not get it, is not looking for it. What's really helpful, though, for understanding TCKs is that this is just one type of cross-cultural childhood experience in this bigger umbrella called cross-cultural kids, or CCKs. So there are a lot of people who aren't technically TCKs who really resonate with and are helped by the literature. For example, immigrant kids, because it's a very similar experience, kind of reversed, of being caught between the country I live in and the country of my family's origin. The difference being that for the immigrant kid, the country I live in is where I have legal status. And for the TCK, the country my parents are from is where I have legal status. But also, you know, asylum seekers and refugee kids, kids who grow up in borderland communities, people who are minority communities within a majority community, bicultural or biracial kids. International adoptees are under that umbrella as well. So there are so many different ways to be meaningfully impacted by more than one culture while you're growing up. TCKs are just one category of these different types of experiences. And often TCKs will have more than one layer of cross-cultural experience. They could be a TCK and also multiracial, multicultural. They could be a TCK and also internationally adopted. They could be a TCK and also an immigrant kid, or all of the above. So that sort of cross-cultural intersectionality, I think, is really important to understand, that often we're talking about kids who have many layers of cross-cultural influence in their lives. But yeah, basic definition, any kid who spends time living outside their passport country would be a third culture kid. And they'll probably self-identify if they've spent 3 years between the ages of 7 and 18, they'll almost certainly identify with this literature. Outside that, it's hit or miss whether they'll identify with it or not.
So tell us a little bit about what got you started professionally studying third culture kids or cross-cultural kids.
I started working with TCKs almost by accident. I had a friend who was running a youth group for TCKs, and I was working as an admin assistant, and every Friday he'd come in and say, hey, come to youth group. And every Friday I'd say, no, I'm going home. It's the end of the week and I'm tired. And so after about a month of this, one day I said no, and then I packed up a couple hours later and went to leave, and I'm like, but for 2 hours I had in my head, I should go to youth group. And so I gave up and I came back and I went to youth group, and the very first time I just felt at home. Now, 2 years later, when I realized I'm a TCK, this makes a bit more sense. But at the time I had no idea what was going on. Second week I was hooked, and I didn't miss for the whole time I lived in Beijing. So we had 5 people for 80 kids. The kids were a huge mixture. So we had missionary kids, corporate kids like me, military kids, lots of diplomat kids, teachers' kids, and some who their parents were just sort of entrepreneurs running their own businesses, things like that. They were from all over the world. And that was my introduction to the third culture world, was this incredibly varied community. I didn't know just one type. I knew kids that were moving every 1, 2, 3 years. I knew kids that had been there their entire lives. I knew kids that moved from country to country, and kids that just came to one country and went home. I knew kids from all of these different demographics. And that was my picture of what the third culture was from the very outset. So I started out just a volunteer, coming and hanging out. Within 3 to 6 months, it was clear that I was connecting with them on a different level than a lot of people. And after a while, I realized that something is clicking different, like this works. So it finally clicked that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And I started doing this full time. I started being asked to speak at some events, some parent events and some training events, and started to realize that things that I took for granted as obvious about this group of young people, other people didn't know. And they kept asking me for resources. I'm like, well, I guess I'll put together something that I can hand out whenever I do this. And that turned into what is now a 400-page book. But it started from just seeing a need from parents who were feeling guilty and anxious, and putting together some research that could help them feel less stressed about what the future is going to look like. That the majority of TCKs were thankful for their experience. Even if they also had negative feelings that they'd gone through, they wouldn't take it back. So 98% of the TCKs I surveyed for that book, and there was 750 in the survey, 98% said they would not take back that experience if they could. 80-90% were thankful and grateful to have been TCKs. And that's even though a large percentage also felt some negative things. They were able to hold the two together, right? It's both at the same time. And
thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and that's what I really wanted to bring, was this hope for parents. Let me help you understand your kids and give you tools on how to connect with them, understand their point of view. But as I started sending it out to some of the adult TCKs I'd been interviewing as beta readers, like, have I got this right? Have I captured your voice correctly? Is this correct?
Yeah.
The main response I was getting was that I burst into tears while reading this. I was like, okay, so I think I'm writing for parents, but the adult TCK is going to read this too. So it needs to work for both. And I restructured the entire book to work for both audiences because so many TCKs were like me. Either they didn't know they were a TCK or they didn't know that other people had had the same TCK experiences they had had. And it is so powerful knowing that you are not the only one. And the biggest thing that came out of it was repatriation. The most painful experience that most TCKs had was repatriation. It was going back to their passport country. With missionary kids, the top most difficult experience was home assignment, which is a form of repatriation. So just across the board, that's what they found the most difficult. That was what they were asking for resources on. Tell me how to deal with this. More than half of them felt isolated when they arrived in their passport country. And of those, 75% were still feeling isolated a year later. And so working through repatriation with them, giving them tools for that became a huge part. Half the book is dealing with grief and goodbyes and repatriation and starting again, because that was the big thing that they needed help with.
Okay, folks, so we're going to be talking more about Tanya's book, Misunderstood, in our next episode, so make sure you come back for that. She's giving you a little taste right now, but we'll talk about it more in depth in our next episode. So Tanya, give some jewels of wisdom for us, for parents, please.
Okay, so a few things. I really think what makes these transitions difficult is our expectations. When we expect to just slot back into an old life and it doesn't happen, that was my story, right? I, as a teenager, expected everything to go back to normal, and it didn't happen. And that disconnect is what was most painful. That disconnect of expectation and reality is what causes the most pain for most people. So when we have a realistic expectation, then we have an easier time. So here's some realistic expectations for you. The transition of moving to any new place, but especially for repatriation, 18 months to 2 years. So part of why it's that long is that in the first year, everything's new. You're doing things for the first time. It's your first birthday in this place. It's your first Christmas. It's your first Easter. It's your first summer holiday. It's the first time you're doing these things. And all the way through that first year, you're having firsts. So some things become familiar quickly because you go to school so many times, or you go to work so many times, or you do the laundry so many times that they become familiar quickly. But there are firsts throughout that first year. And so once you get to about 18 months in and you're repeating things, it starts to become more familiar, feel more normal, and that really helps. Another thing to keep in mind, the number of years that you have been away from your passport country, turn that into months, and that's how long until you would expect to feel even semi-normal. That's a really good ballpark. So if you've been gone 10 years, it's going to take you nearly a year to start even feeling a little bit normal and not so discombobulated. And the number of years you've been gone, half that number of years to feel genuinely at home. So if you've been gone 10 years, it's going to take you 5 years to really feel at home again. And so when you have that expectation, you don't feel guilty and you don't stress out about not being there yet because you're not supposed to be there yet. And that really helps a lot. Even though it doesn't take away the difficulty of it, it takes away the guilt and the pressure of it. So those expectations are helpful.
That's important.
Now, in terms of kids, I work for a company called TCK Training. We talk a lot about the red zone and the green zone, which is about where our toxic stress levels are. You would expect in a transition season to have 3 months in the red zone, stress zone. You and your kids are going to be stressed out for 3 months after a major transition. And so it is okay to see behavior regressions. So if you have small kids, things like having more potty accidents, struggling in school, having meltdowns and behavior issues, like for 3 months, that is totally normal. All right. So if you're seeing those issues, that is normal.
Thank you for saying that.
Normal. Then we'd expect in sort of the 3 to 6 month time period for it to be improving. And after about 6 months for you to see everyone kind of in more of a normal, healthy kind of zone. So if you're within that kind of framework, that's normal. Don't worry about it. If that red zone goes longer than 3 to 6 months, that's when you want to seek extra help. So go and be talking to counselors or getting behavioral help for them. But it's okay for things to look chaotic at first. That's a normal reaction to transition because everything's out of sync, everything's out of whack. So when everything feels chaotic, that is not a reflection on you doing anything wrong. That is a reflection on this is a difficult thing to do. And it is completely okay for things to be a bit chaotic for a while. And one of the best things you can do in that situation is lean into routine, repeats, familiar. Just cook the same 5 meals over and over again. Go to the exact same grocery store, buy the exact same things, go to one cafe over and over again so that you're creating these familiar routines and these autopilots that you don't have to think about. And that'll help everybody feel a bit more relaxed and comfortable.
That's such good advice because when everything is new, creating some foundation of, things that are predictable, things that feel safe, things that feel comfortable, it just makes so much sense that would be something to build on rather than something to avoid.
We often feel pressure to go and do all the things. Like we need to see this thing and do this thing and take advantage of being here, whether it's in a new country or in your own passport country. But just take the pressure off that, especially for that first 3 to 6 months. And just be boring. Do boring things. Do comfortable things and familiar things.
Tanya, thank you for the permission to be in that chaos for 3 months and know that it's normal. Normal. And then also the permission to know that, gosh, we are approaching the green zone when it's, 6 months? But if not, that's okay. And permission to go and get some more help. And a lot of the people we talk to have received some repatriation training kind of at the beginning of the repatriation. But do you know any other resources that are available for people who are more out, or maybe 6 months or a year or even 2 years into their repatriation who, still need support? And it sure is nice to be understood.
Things I think is most difficult about things like repatriation training is you get it before you're actually in it and feel it. And so it doesn't often connect because you have no idea what's going to hit and what's going to be helpful at the time. And so when you're getting these kind of trainings, if you can get the kind of trainings that you can dip back in and out of, that can be really helpful. So I recently helped create a self-guided online course so you can go in and out of it anytime you want. And it's a full transitions course. So it covers all aspects of transition, preparing to go and arriving and repatriation and crisis transitions and emotional regulation for kids. It's the whole thing. So but something like that where you can dip in and out can be really, really helpful because you can be like, I remember there being something about this. Why don't I go back to that? The one I've used like a lot is I do one on coping with change, which is all about talking about how your body reacts. And again, just dipping in and out of like, okay, this is what's happening with my body. There's also some great communities. Being part of communities where you're understood implicitly, that I find is one of the best things out there. So TCK training does have some community stuff. FIGT is also another great community. That's Families in Global Transition. And it's a combination of people who are living abroad, people who are cross-cultural, people who have repatriated, and just, being able to be connected with people who understand can be a really great support network. It's why podcasts like this can be really helpful when communities build up around and you're like, oh, it's not just me. Honestly, it's not just me is often the main thing that we need.
Amen.
Well, I can't wait. I can't wait for us to get to talk more and hear more about your book in the second part of this interview.
Thank you, Tanya, for sharing your personal third culture kid story from the U.S. and Australia, and then unpacking what it means to be a TCK, or third culture kid. Your research has shown that the most painful experiences many TCKs face is repatriation, but you offer hope to kids and parents with your resources and support. TCKs and their families do not need to feel alone during these transitions back to their passport countries. Make sure you see links to Tanya's resources in our show notes. Remember to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of Tanya's interview, where she will continue to share her findings about TCKs and adult TCKs.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first-class seating? Be sure to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And make sure you go to our website at roundtripstories.com so that you can subscribe to our email list and get notifications right in your inbox whenever there is a new episode.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.